All right, partner, settle in. I'm going to tell you a story that still gives me the shivers, even after all these years. Back in the summer of 1867, way out near Sedalia, Missouri, on a lonesome farm, there lived an 8-year-old boy named Timothy Caldwell. Now, this kid became the center of the most downright unsettling medical case anyone ever wrote down in the whole Midwest. Our local sawbones, Dr. Samuel Harding, the only proper physician for miles around, filled up 3 whole leather journals trying to figure out this child. What he saw didn't fit anything folks knew about human nature back then. On the outside, Timothy seemed like any other kid, maybe even nicer than most. But underneath that innocent face, well, there was something there that the medicine of the day just plain couldn't explain. Over 6 months, 3 good folks died in what looked like accidents near Timothy Caldwell. Dozens of farm animals turned up dead too, under mighty strange circumstances. 11 people in total, all folks who'd crossed paths with that boy whose smile never quite lit up those pale blue eyes of his. The town bigwigs sealed up the records and hid him away for more than 100 years. But the truth about Timothy Caldwell? It shows a kind of darkness that makes you question everything you ever thought about how much evil can live inside a child. Before we get deeper into the terror that took hold of Sedalia County, if this yarn is catching your ear, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our deep dives into America's darkest history. And drop us a line in the comments. Tell us what state or city you're listening from. We love hearing from fellow mystery buffs all over the globe. Now, Timothy Caldwell's story didn't start with bloodshed. It started with plain old heartbreak. Back in 1867, Missouri was still hurting bad from the Civil War. Towns like Sedalia had sent their young men off to die on battlefields far away, leaving behind widows, orphans, and folks just trying to scrape by and rebuild. The Caldwell place, tucked down in a valley about 15 miles south of town, used to be doing all right. James and Martha Caldwell built their home dreaming of raising cattle and corn. But those dreams got buried with James when he fell at the Battle of Wilson's Creek back in 1861. Martha tried her best to keep the farm going alone, but the consumption took her lungs in that awful winter of 1865. Their boy Thomas, barely 21, got stuck with land he couldn't work and debts he couldn't pay. Then came word his brother William had died down in Andersonville prison, leaving behind a widow and an 8-year-old son. Thomas saw both a burden and a chance. The boy, Timothy, needed a home, and Thomas sure needed an extra pair of hands for the endless farm work. Thomas Caldwell was a tough man, hardened even more by the war and all he'd lost. His wife Sarah had turned sharp-tongued and bitter over their years without children. Neither one was exactly cut out for raising a kid, especially one who showed up on their doorstep in the spring of 1866 carrying nothing but a small cloth bag and eyes that looked way too old for his little face. Timothy Caldwell was small for his age, with pale skin that burned red fast under the Missouri sun, and blonde hair his Aunt Sarah kept cropped short to keep lice away. He hardly ever talked about his life before coming to the farm, only off-air in little pieces if folks pushed. His daddy had been a soldier. His mama had coughed up blood. He'd lived with neighbors for a spell after she passed. What struck grown-ups most about Timothy was his manners. Always yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. Never complained about chores or punishment. By all appearances, he was the picture of a perfectly behaved little boy. Dr. Samuel Harding first laid eyes on Timothy in June of 1866, when the boy tagged along with his uncle to town for supplies. Dr. Harding, a graduate of the Missouri Medical College and one of the few real-deal doctors west of St. Louis, had learned a thing or two about reading folks during his years patching up soldiers from both sides. Something about the Caldwell boy made him uneasy, though he couldn't put his finger on it. The child was perfectly respectful, Dr. Harding wrote later in his journal. He answered questions straight, looked me in the eye just right, didn't fidget or act shy like most country kids do with strangers. But I felt downright uncomfortable being near him. His stare had this intensity, like he was studying me with the same cold interest I usually save for my patients. Now, the farming folks around Sedalia knew each other's business pretty well. The Caldwell place was out a ways, but not so far that neighbors didn't notice things. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, whose land backed up to the Caldwells, would often spot Timothy work in the fields or tending the animals. She told her husband Samuel over supper one night that the boy worked with a focus that wasn't natural for a child his age. Never seems to tire, she said. Never stops to play or rest, like kids just do. It's like watching a little machine. He'd work steady from sunup to sundown, never complaining, never slowing down. Ain't natural for a boy to have no play in him at all. Eleanor also noticed her chickens got all worked up whenever Timothy got near the property line. They'd huddle together, fussing and ruffling their feathers, refusing to go anywhere near the fence. Her husband called it coincidence, but Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling the animals sensed something about the boy that people missed. The first death happened on a scorching, hot afternoon in August 1866. Little Mary Fletcher, just 5 years old, was the blacksmith's daughter. Everybody knew her for her bright laugh and her habit of wandering off. She'd been playing near Willow Creek, a shallow stream that ran past several farms, including the Caldwells. Timothy found her body. He showed up at the Fletcher place just as they were sitting down to supper. His clothes were damp, his face pale, looking genuinely upset. "Miss Fletcher," he said, his voice steady even though he seemed rattled. "I found Mary by the creek. She ain't breathing." The search party that ran down to the creek found Mary Fletcher face down in water barely 18 inches deep. Dr. Harding, called right away, figured the child had drowned. A terrible accident, sure, but not unheard of in the country where kids played near water alone. What bothered Dr. Harding wasn't the drowning itself, but Timothy's story about finding her. The boy gave an awful lot of detail. Exactly where Mary was, how her body was lying, the state of her dress. When asked how he happened to be there just then, Timothy said he'd been looking for a lost calf. The boy's memory was sharp as a tack, Dr. Harding wrote. He could describe exactly how the poor child's arms and legs were, how her dress caught on a branch under the water, even the color of the water around her face. Paying that much attention seemed mighty odd for a kid claiming to be scared and upset by what he saw. Thomas Caldwell backed him up, saying one of their calves had gone missing that morning, and he had sent Timothy to search along the creek. They found the calf 2 days later, fine and grazing in a meadow almost a mile from where Mary Fletcher drowned. The Fletchers, shattered by their loss, took Timothy's sympathy with thanks. After all, he'd been the one to find their daughter and let him know quick. At the funeral, Timothy sat quiet with his aunt and uncle, head bowed respectful the whole time. When the family thanked him for telling them fast, he took their thanks with the right amount of sadness. "I wish I could have found her sooner," he told Mary's daddy, his voice sounding just regretful enough. But Eleanor Patterson, watching from across the church, saw something that stuck with her. When Mary Fletcher's mama broke down crying, when the sight of that tiny coffin made grown men weep, Timothy Caldwell's face didn't change one bit. His head was down like he was sad, but when he thought nobody was looking, those pale blue eyes stayed dry and watchful, taking in every single thing happening around him. The second death came 3 weeks later. Old Henrik Larsson, a Norwegian fella who'd been a logger till his arthritis forced him to quit, was found dead at the bottom of a rocky spot called Devil's Bluff. This bluff looked over the same creek where Mary Fletcher drowned, and Henrik climbed up there regular to check on wild beehives he kept. Once again, Timothy Caldwell was the one who found him. He'd been walking home from town when he spotted something odd at the base of the bluff. "I saw Mr. Larson's hat caught on a thorn bush," Timothy told the crowd that gathered. "I hollered for him but got no answer, so I climbed down to look." Henrik Larsson was dead. His neck broke from what seemed like a fall off that 40-foot bluff. Dr. Harding's look over showed the old man probably died the second he hit. The only strange thing was a bunch of dead bees scattered round the body, way more than you'd usually find away from a hive. Mr. Larson knew them bluffs better than anybody in the county, Samuel Patterson told Dr. Harding later. He'd been climbing up there 3 years, never so much as stumbled. Don't add up he'd fall now. Timothy, when asked about it, suggested maybe the old man got stung and lost his futin. He was always talking about how mad they get when you bother him, the boy said. Maybe they swarmed him and he got mixed up. Dr. Harding thought Timothy's idea made sense, but something about the scene didn't sit right. The dead bees were all piled up in one little spot right around Henrik's body. If he'd stirred up a hive at the top, there should have been more signs of bees along where he fell. Instead, it seemed like the bees had somehow been gathered right where he landed. When Dr. Harding climbed up to check the hives himself, He found him just fine, not looking bothered at all. The worker bees were busy, but not angry, just doing their usual nectar collecting from the late summer flowers. The third death blew any idea of bad luck right out of the water. In September 1866, little 6-year-old Jacob Mills vanished while playing in the woods near his family's cabin. They found his body 4 days later in an old, abandoned well, nearly half a mile from where he was last seen. Timothy Caldwell had put his hand up to join the search party. For 3 days, Timothy searched right alongside the grown men, showing grit you wouldn't expect from a kid his age. He seemed to know those woods like the back of his hand, lead in searchers through thickets even folks who'd lived there forever found hard to get through. When asked how he knew the land so well, Timothy said he often explored the woods in his spare time, hunting for plants and herbs his aunt could use for cooking and medicine. On the 4th day, Timothy showed up at the Mills cabin just after sunup. "I think I found something," he told Jacob's daddy, sounding dead tired. "There's an old well, about half a mile north of here. I heard crying, sounded like." That well was mostly hidden by fallen logs and thick brush. Jacob Mills was down at the bottom, alive but barely hanging on, suffering from thirst and being out in the elements. Dr. Harding got called fast, but the boy died within hours of being pulled out, his little body too far gone. "That child was in the bottom of that well nearly 4 days," Dr. Harding wrote. The fact that Timothy Caldwell found him in such a hidden spot asks some hard questions. Just how much does that boy know about the land around here? What other hidden dangers might he know about? Even worse was how Timothy acted while Jacob was dying. While the Mills family kept watch over their fading son, Timothy sat quiet in a corner, looking like he was praying. But Dr. Harding, sitting where he could watch the boy without being seen, saw something that chilled him to the bone. Timothy wasn't praying. His lips were moving, but his eyes were locked onto Jacob Mills with a focus that was almost scientific. He seemed to be taking notes on everything about the dying boy, the struggling breaths, the pale skin, the way he faded in and out. When Jacob finally passed, Timothy's face showed no grief, no shock. Instead, there was something Dr. Harding could only call satisfaction. After the funeral, Dr. Harding made an excuse to visit that abandoned well. What he saw troubled him deep down, though he couldn't say exactly why. The well was hidden good, covered by nature's mess that would have taken real effort to move. Yet Timothy claimed he heard crying from there, which seemed mighty unlikely given how deep the well was and how much brush covered it. As Dr. Harding looked closer, he saw something the rescue party missed in their hurry to save Jacob. Around the well's edge, the mess looked arranged. Logs and branches that should have fallen any which way seemed placed careful-like, making a cover that looked natural, but you'd never spot unless you knew exactly where to look. What it meant was too awful to say out loud, but Dr. Harding couldn't shake the feeling Jacob Mills hadn't just fallen in. Somebody had put him there, and somebody had covered it up good till the boy was too weak to make it. That evening, Dr. Harding started keeping real careful notes about Timothy Caldwell. If his gut feeling was right, the boy was a danger to everybody. But feelings ain't proof, and proof was exactly what Dr. Harding didn't have. The trouble was Timothy Caldwell seemed, by every measure, like a perfect kid. He went to church regular with his aunt and uncle, sitting quiet through services and saying his prayers right. He worked hard on the farm, doing chores that'd wear out many a grown man. He spoke respectful to his elders and knew his place. Most important, Timothy had good reasons for being where he was each time. Looking for a lost calf when he found Mary Fletcher. Walking home from town when he spotted Henrik Larsson's hat. Volunteered to help find Jacob Mills, like any decent neighbor would. But Dr. Harding's training taught him to look deeper. Patching up soldiers, he'd learned to spot the signs of men who killed not for duty or need, but for something darker. There was a coldness in those men, a disconnect from normal feelings. Too little reaction to horror, too much interest in suffering, talking about violence like it was a science project. Timothy Caldwell showed all of that, but packed into the body of an 8-year-old. Dr. Harding got serious about his looking into things in October 1866. Using his spot as the town doctor, he made his rounds to farms and homes, saying he was checking on folks still hidden from the war. Really, he was digging for dirt on Timothy Caldwell. What he found painted a scary picture of a kid who seemed to be right in the middle of a growing circle of bad luck. Livestock on nearby farms was dying way more than usual, not from sickness, but from what looked like accidents. Chickens found with their necks snapped, blamed on foxes that left no tracks. Pigs got strange wounds that turned bad and killed them. Horses went lame sudden, making farmers put them down. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson told Dr. Harding she'd lost 17 chickens in 2 months. "It's the strangest thing," she said. "They're dying 1 or 2 at a time, always found in the morning with their necks broke clean. My husband thinks foxes, but I ain't seen hide nor hair of a fox near the coop. And the way they're killed, it's too neat, too careful." When Dr. Harding checked the latest dead birds, he saw proof Eleanor was right. Those chickens had been killed with a real precise hit to just the right spot on their necks, something that took no anatomy. It wasn't the messy work of a wild animal. It was planned and controlled. Same thing happened other places. James Wickham lost 3 calves to what he called freak accidents. Critters that somehow choked themselves on ropes or got their heads stuck in fence rails in ways that just didn't make sense. Robert Dunham's prize bull fell in a ditch and broke its leg, even though it was known as the steadiest animal around. Every time, the farms hit were close enough for Timothy to walk to, and neighbors remembered seeing him around when things happened. "I saw him walking our fence line the morning before we found the calf," James Wickham told Dr. Harding. "Thought it was odd, him being so far from home, but the boy was always polite, waved and said hello like he had good reason." Dr. Harding also started watching Timothy closer during his regular visits to the Caldwell farm. The boy was always there, standing quiet while the doctor checked his aunt and uncle for the usual farm aches and pains. But Harding saw Timothy watching these exams with a kind of interest that wasn't normal for a kid his age. He asked questions about how bodies worked and doctrine that sounded way too advanced. "How do you know for sure someone's dead?" Timothy asked once, sounding as casual as talking about the rain. "Sometimes folks just look like they're sleeping." When pushed about why he was curious, Timothy said he was worried about helping if someone got hurt while he was alone on the farm. "Uncle Thomas says I gotta know how to handle trouble since we're so far from town," he explained. It made sense on the surface, but something about the question spooked Dr. Harding. There was a cold, clinical way Timothy asked about dying, how long it took, what signs to watch for, if folks could survive different hurts, the same way a medical student might look at a dead body. During these talks, Dr. Harding started testing Timothy by giving him wrong information on purpose, saying certain injuries were deadly when they weren't, or that symptoms meant something they didn't. Timothy never argued with the lie straight out, but Dr. Harding saw the boy stored away every word like a squirrel savon nuts. Even worse was how Timothy reacted when Dr. Harding told stories about fixing up hurt soldiers. Most kids got sad or shocked hearing about battlefield wounds. Timothy listened glued, a skin detailed questions about wounds, bleeding, and who lived. "Did they scream a lot when you cut their arms off?" Timothy asked during one story, those pale blue eyes locked on Dr. Harding's face. "Or were they too hurt to make noise?" That question, said in Timothy's polite little voice, sent a chill through Dr. Harding he never forgot. By November 1866, Dr. Harding had filled nearly 2 whole journals with notes on Timothy Caldwell. The picture coming clear was of a child with a grown man's understanding of violence and death, mixed with a total lack of normal human feeling for others. But writing things down wasn't the same as having proof, and proof was what Dr. Harding needed if he was going to protect folks from what he was starting to believe was a dangerous animal. His chance came when Thomas Caldwell hurt his back during the fall harvest. Needed bed rest and daily doctor visits, giving Dr. Harding more time at the Caldwell house than ever before. During these visits, he got Timothy talking longer, carefully probing to see just how much the boy knew and how his mind worked. What he found out was worse than his worst nightmares. Timothy Caldwell had been running experiments on living things for months, maybe years. Through careful questions and watching close, Dr. Harding figured out the boy had been methodically catching and hunting small animals, studying how they reacted to different kinds of pain and suffering. Timothy mentioned a cave during one talk, calling it his thinking spot. When Dr. Harding checked it out, he found a neat collection of animal bones, rough tools made from farm gear turned into cutting things, and a bunch of real detailed drawings showing different ways he'd tortured and cut up critters. The drawings were the worst part. Done with real skill for a kid, they showed rabbits, squirrels, birds, and bigger animals cut open or hurt in different ways. Each drawing had notes in Timothy's careful writing, saying how the animal reacted, how long it took to die, and what ways caused the most pain. Subject stayed awake about 10 minutes after eyes taken out, read one note next to a drawing of a rabbit. Screaming got quieter slow. Stopped moving after pressure put on throat. Dr. Harding realized the accidents on neighbors' farms were really Timothy testing his methods on bigger subjects. But the most chilling find was a newer set of drawings showing people instead of animals. These sketches showed kids and grown-ups hurt or suffering, each with notes guessing about human bodies and how to hurt them. One drawing was clearly Mary Fletcher, the first child to die. Another was Henrik Larson. A third showed Jacob Mills in that well, with notes about what thirst and being out in the cold does to a body. Timothy Caldwell hadn't just been there when these folks died. He'd planned their deaths, done it step by step, and wrote down what happened to study later. And as Dr. Harding would soon find out, the terror in Sedalia County was far from done. Dr. Harding was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The stuff in the cave proved Timothy Caldwell caused those deaths, but he'd found it by snooping around where he shouldn't have been. Plus, the idea that an 8-year-old could be a cold-blooded killer was so far from what folks believed back then that no court would buy it. Medicine in 1867 had no name for folks without a conscience or feeling for others. Everybody figured kids were born good, turned bad only by rough living or hard times. That a child could be born without feeling for others or knowing right from wrong. Most folks couldn't even picture it. Dr. Harding knew if he took his findings to the law, they'd likely think the war had addled his brain. They'd explain away the proof. Folks would defend Timothy as a poor orphan acting out his sadness, and the killings would keep happening. So, Dr. Harding decided to face Timothy head-on. During his next visit to the Caldwell farm, he asked the boy to walk out with him to check on the animals in the far pasture. When they were alone, Dr. Harding told him what he'd found in the cave. Timothy's reaction wasn't what he expected. The boy didn't look surprised, didn't deny it, didn't seem scared of being caught. He just listened calm while Dr. Harding talked about the drawings and notes, nodding now and then like he was agreeing the doctor had it right. "You ain't gonna tell nobody," Timothy said when Dr. Harding finished. It wasn't a question or a begging favor. It was a fact said with total confidence. "Why wouldn't I?" Dr. Harding asked, really wondering how the boy figured it. Timothy smiled, the first real emotion Dr. Harding ever saw on his face. "'Cause nobody'd believe you," he said, "and 'cause you're curious about what I'll do next." The boy hit the nail on the head both times. Dr. Harding knew his story would sound crazy, but Timothy also pegged something the doctor hated to admit: a scientific itch to watch what might be the most dangerous person he'd ever meet grow up. "How long you been doing this?" Dr. Harding asked. "Since I was 5, Timothy answered matter-of-factly. "Maybe sooner. Started with bugs, then mice, then bigger things. It's interesting seeing how different critters handle the same hurt. And the folks who died." Timothy shrugged. "They was experiments too. Wanted to see if people reacted like animals. Mostly they do, but they're smarter about knowing what's happening. Makes it more interesting." Dr. Harding felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November air. "What you fixin' to do next?" Timothy thought about it serious before answering. "I need to find out what happens when you hurt somebody who trusts you plumb through. Somebody who wouldn't suspect a thing till it was too late." The meaning was clear as day. Timothy was planning to kill his aunt and uncle. Dr. Harding knew. He maybe had days, maybe just hours, before Timothy made his move. The boy had laid out his plan with the easy confidence of someone who figured he couldn't be touched. And past times showed Timothy didn't wait once he'd made up his mind. That evening, Dr. Harding went to see Sheriff William Crawford in Sedalia. Crawford was a practical man, served well in the Union Army, and had no time for wild theories. But he trusted Dr. Harding's judgment and was willing to hear proof, no matter how strange. Dr. Harding laid out his case careful, sticking to facts he could prove, not head-shrinking ideas. He showed Crawford the drawings and notes from the cave, pointed out the pattern of deaths and accidents around Timothy, and showed how the boy knew too much about bodies and hidden folks. Most important, Dr. Harding told Crawford what Timothy said he'd do to his aunt and uncle. That was something you couldn't just ignore, no matter who said it. "Even if only half what you're telling me is true," Sheriff Crawford said after looking over the proof, staring hard at each awful drawing. We can't lock up a kid over drawings and hunches. But we can watch him, and we can be ready to jump if he tries anything. Crawford studied the body detail in Timothy's sketches, seeing things even his war years hadn't prepared him for. The two men spent hours planning, bringing in Crawford's most trusted deputies, men who'd served with him and wouldn't rattle under pressure. Dr. Harding and Sheriff Crawford cooked up a plan. Dr. Harding would show up at the Caldwell farm at his usual time, bringing laudanum for Thomas's pain, but really to keep both Thomas and Sarah doped up enough so Timothy couldn't hurt him easy. Sheriff Crawford and his men would hide around the farm, close enough to rush in quick, but far enough back not to be seen. They put the plan to work the next morning. As Dr. Harding drove his buggy up to the farmhouse, he knew right off something was wrong. The usual morning sounds, chickens scratching, pigs grunting, were gone. The place was creepily quiet, making his skin crawl. Timothy was standing in the doorway before Dr. Harding even got down from his buggy. The boy stood stone still, those pale blue eyes tracking the doctor's every move like a hawk watching a mouse. He wore his usual work clothes, but Dr. Harding saw Timothy's sleeves were rolled up past his elbows, and his hands looked freshly scrubbed, the kind of clean you do before messy work. "Morning, Dr. Harding," Timothy said, sounding his usual polite self, but something underneath had shifted. There was an eagerness there, an excitement he was trying hard to hold back. "I've been waiting for you." Them words sent a cold wave through Dr. Harding. Timothy saying waiting meant he'd expected this visit, maybe counted on it for whatever he had brewing. Inside the house, Dr. Harding found Thomas and Sarah Caldwell in their bedroom, seeming to sleep peaceful. But when he got close to Thomas's bed to check on him, he saw the man's breathing was too shallow. His skin had a gray look that meant more than natural sleep. "What did you give him?" Dr. Harding asked quiet, not turning around but knowing Timothy was watching. "Just some herbs I found in the woods," Timothy answered, sounding innocent but choosing his words careful. "Plenty of interesting plants grow wild round here. Some got real useful properties." Dr. Harding checked Thomas's pulse. It was weak but steady. Sarah looked the same, deep asleep but alive. Whatever Timothy used, he'd measured it careful. He wanted his victims helpless but breathing, at least for now. "They won't wake up for hours yet," Timothy went on, conversational. "Gives us plenty time to talk without being bothered." The talk that followed wasn't like anything Dr. Harding ever heard. Timothy talked about killing and hitting folks with the cold calm of a professor teaching anatomy. He described his animal and people experiments like a scientist, explaining his methods and what he'd learned from each death. "Mary Fletcher taught me drowning is slow," Timothy said, sitting down like it was time for afternoon tea. "Folks think you just slip under and vanish. Ain't so. There's fighting and panic in this interesting breathe-in pattern for you finally quit." I had to hold her down near 3 minutes, for she stopped struggling. Dr. Harding felt his blood freeze. "You held her under?" Timothy nodded eager. "She was playing by the creek. I told her I found a pretty stone on the bottom. When she bent over to look, I just pushed her head down and held it. She was so small it didn't take much muscle, but she fought harder than I figured. That's when I knew folks got stronger survival instinct than animals." "And Henrik Larson?" "That was trickier," Timothy admitted. "Couldn't overpower him, so I had to be smart. Knew he checked his hives every Thursday morning. Went up to the bluff the night before, loosened some stones along the edge. Then I collected bees from one hive, put them in a cloth bag." Timothy's eyes lit up as he told it. "When Mr. Larson climbed up to check, I was hid behind rocks. Threw the bag of bees at his face, started yelling about a big swarm attacking him. He panicked, stepped right over the edge where I'd loosened the stones. The fall killed him quick, just like I figured." "And Jacob Mills?" "Jacob was the most interesting," Timothy said, sounding like a teacher sharing a great lesson. "Didn't kill him fast like the others. Wanted to see what happened if somebody died slow over days. So I talked him into following me into the woods, told him I found baby raccoons." Timothy paused, seeming to taste the memory. "Jacob was so worried about them make-believe critters, he didn't think about danger. I helped him climb down into the well, then moved logs and brush to cover the hole. Went back every day for 4 days, bringing just enough water to keep him alive, not enough to get strong." Dr. Harding realized Timothy wasn't just talking about future plans anymore. The boy had specific ideas, and those ideas sure included the folks sleeping in the house. "What you planning for your aunt and uncle?" Dr. Harding asked straight out. Timothy's real smile came back, wider than ever. "That's where you come in, Dr. Harding. See, all my other experiments been with folks who didn't know what was coming till too late. But you're different. You know exactly what I am, what I can do. Makes you perfect for a whole new kind of test." As Timothy talked, he started moving around the room, picking up things Dr. Harding knew could be weapons. Rope from the barn, a heavy candlestick from the mantel, some sharp kitchen tools. The boy laid him out neat, like getting ready for surgery. "I want to see what happens when somebody who knows they're going to die tries to save folks they care about," Timothy went on, getting more excited. "Will you throw yourself away to save Uncle Thomas and Aunt Sarah? Will you fight me knowing I planned for it? Will you run off and leave him to save your own skin?" Dr. Harding knew talking time was over. Timothy had said enough to show everybody in that house was in deep trouble right then. He pulled the pistol from his doctor's bag and pointed it at the boy. "Step away from them knives, Timothy," Dr. Harding said, his voice steady even though his heart was pounding. Timothy looked at the gun with interest, not fear. "That's a Navy Colt, ain't it?" he asked casual. "Seen pictures in books about the war. How many bullets it hold?" "6, Dr. Harding answered without thinking, then wished he hadn't. "And how many folks you trying to protect?" Timothy asked. "There's Uncle Thomas, Aunt Sarah, yourself, and likely the 3 lawmen outside. That's 6 people if I counted right. So even if you shoot me, you used up all your lead." Timothy moved closer, not both Aaron to stay out of pistol range. "You want to know how I got this way," he said, his voice almost hypnotic. "You want to understand if I was born like this or something made me. You want to know if there's others like me, how to spot them before they start killing." Every word was true, and Timothy's knack for seeing and using Dr. Harding's curiosity was as frightening as his violence. The boy understood folks well enough to guess how they'd act and work him over, even when they knew they were being played. The showdown came when Timothy walked toward his sleeping uncle with a piece of rope in his hands. Dr. Harding moved to stop him, but Timothy was sudden and strong, pulling out a kitchen knife and slashing the doctor's arm. The fight that followed was short but nasty. Timothy fought like a trapped wildcat, using that knife like he'd practiced plenty. He was smaller and weaker than Dr. Harding, but quicker and more nimble, fighting with the planned moves of someone who knew bodies inside out. Dr. Harding managed to grab Timothy's wrist and twist till the boy dropped the knife, but Timothy pulled another blade from his clothes right off. It was plain the boy had stashed weapons all over the house. The noise of their fight brought Sheriff Crawford and his deputies running from their hiding spots. They busted through the back door to find Dr. Harding wrestling Timothy, while Thomas and Sarah Caldwell lay knocked out on their bed, oblivious. Deputy Mitchell grabbed Timothy quick, while Dr. Harding caught his breath and checked the sleeping couple. When things calmed down, Timothy Caldwell sat cool in a corner, clothes torn, face bloody, but those pale blue eyes still holding that same cold smartness that first spooked Dr. Harding months before. "Can't prove nothing," Timothy said as the deputies tied him up. "Nobody'll believe a kid did all that." Sheriff Crawford looked down at the boy with disgust and a kind of awful wonder. "Maybe not," he said, "but we don't need to prove it all. Trying to murder your family's enough to lock you up, no matter how old you are." Timothy smiled at that, the same real look Dr. Harding saw the day before. "You won't hang me," he said, dead certain. "I'm too young, and I'm too interesting. Somebody'll want to study me instead." Just when you think it can't get worse, the terror in Sedalia County digs deeper. If this yarn's got your spine tingling, share this video with a friend who loves dark history. Smash that like button to help us out. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss tales like this. Let's find out together what comes next. Timothy Caldwell was wrong about his end, but right about proving his crimes. When Sheriff Crawford tried showing the cave evidence to the county lawyers, he hit exactly the wall Dr. Harding figured he would. The drawings and notes got tossed as the work of a troubled kid acting out his parents' deaths. The pattern of accidents and deaths got blamed on bad luck, made worse by Timothy being too helpful in bad times. But the try at killing Thomas and Sarah Caldwell couldn't be explained away. 3 lawmen saw Timothy attack his sleeping relatives with a knife, clear as day. Even the softest heart couldn't argue an 8-year-old boy would knife his own kin unless something was real wrong inside. The law in 1867 had no way to handle a violent child. Timothy was too young for grown-up court, but too dangerous for an orphanage or reform school. The case caused big problems for Missouri's courts, getting attention from law folks and doctors all over the region. After weeks of arguing and talking to experts from as far as Boston and Philadelphia, they made a deal. Timothy would be sent to the Missouri State Hospital for the Insane in Fulton. There, he'd be studied and treated by the best head doctors around. Nobody was really happy. Prosecutors wanted Timothy tried as a man for murder. Defense lawyers said no kid that young could be held responsible. Doctors were split between those who thought Timothy could be fixed and those who saw him as pure danger. Dr. Samuel Harding offered to go with Timothy and stayed there 3 months, watching the boy and helping the staff figure out what they had. The case study he made was one of the first good looks at kids without a conscience, though it wasn't printed till long after. Timothy settled into hospital life with the same smart calculation he'd shown on the farm. He learned fast to fake the right feelings and answers, convincing some staff he was getting way better. Timothy could cry real tears talking about his crimes, seem truly sorry, and look honestly thankful for the care. But Dr. Harding saw Timothy was just studying people, learning to work him better. The boy had made a whole catalog of how folks act when they feel things, and he could copy those signals perfect even though he felt nothing inside. The subject shows strong thinking skills mixed with no real feeling, Dr. Harding wrote. He's learned to act normal well enough to fool folks who don't look close, but watching long shows it's all fake. Timothy knows happiness is the face folks make when they want good things to keep going, and sadness is the face for when they want help, but he's never felt either one himself. Dr. Harding's look also showed how deep Timothy's violent ideas and future plans ran. When the boy thought he'd won Dr. Harding's trust by pretending interest in science, Timothy started sharing ideas for new experiments that made his old crimes look tame. He's cooked up detailed plans for testing how folks react to different kinds of torture, mind and body, Dr. Harding reported private. His plans show scary creativity and detail, and a sharp know-how of how people's minds work. If he grew up and got more resources, he'd likely be one of the most dangerous men in America. Hospital records show Timothy stayed there 18 months. In that time, several weird things happened that smelled like Timothy's handiwork. Other patients died looking like accidents or natural causes, but showing signs of planning when looked at close. 3 old folks died of heart trouble after talking to Timothy, though they'd been fairly healthy. 2 younger patients had accidental falls that hurt him bad, but both times Timothy had been seen there earlier. Worst were reports of patients saying Timothy visited him at night, standing silent by their beds watching him sleep. Staff working with Timothy started having troubles too. Several nurses had bad dreams after being with the boy, nightmares full of violence and death. 2 helpers asked to move to other wards, saying they felt watched all the time, even when Timothy was locked up. Dr. Martha Fitzgerald, brought in special to help with Timothy, found out the boy kept a secret journal. Timothy had sweet-talked a nurse into giving him paper and pencil for healing writing, claiming writing down his thoughts and feelings would help him. The journal looked like just that, daily writing about his thoughts, being sorry for what he did, hoping to get better. It sounded like a kid painting a picture of a troubled but fixable boy dealing with hard times. But Dr. Fitzgerald knew about secret codes from her training in Europe. When she looked close at Timothy's journal, she found a sneaky cipher. The decoded messages showed Timothy's real thoughts and plans, awful details. Instead of being sorry or getting better, he was studying the hospital, the staff, the security. His goal wasn't just to escape. It was to use his time locked up to get better at working people and killing. Day 47. One decoded entry read, Dr. F. thinks my crying today was real. She's getting softer, less suspicious. Figure 3 more weeks of this act should build enough trust for touching during sessions. Finding Timothy's coded journal made him lock things down tight fast, cutting his time with staff. But Timothy switched gears easy, focusing on learning hospital routines and ways out. In the summer of 1868, Timothy Caldwell vanished from the Missouri State Hospital. How? Never fully explained. The official story said he slipped away during a move between buildings. even with guards watching. Dr. Harding figured Timothy's escape was way smarter than that. The boy had shown scary patience and planning locked up. Likely he'd spent months getting ready. Clues found after he was gone showed he'd been working the staff way better than anyone knew. Several guards admitted bending small rules for Timothy in the weeks before he left, giving him extra time outside. More books, little changes to his day that seemed harmless alone, but maybe together opened a door. He spent a year and a half studying that place and its people, Dr. Harding wrote in his last report. By the time he moved, he knew how every worker there thought better in, they knew themselves. His escape wasn't a panic. It was the end of a careful plan. In the months and years after Timothy disappeared, Dr. Harding started collecting reports of strange deaths and accidents all over the Midwest. Many had signs pointing to Timothy's way of doing things. Clever accidents that killed, proof of animal torture, and a kid showing up who seemed too helpful and grown up for his age. The problem was Timothy would be older now, strong enough maybe to take a grown man, and sure smart enough not to make the mistakes that got him caught before. His time studying people's minds, mixed with his natural smarts and no conscience, had made something new in American crime. Dr. Harding spent his last years tracking these reports, trying to understand what Timothy Caldwell meant. His private journals, found after he died in 1891, had hundreds of pages on cases that might have been Timothy, plus big thoughts about evil and whether some folks are born without knowing right from wrong. What Timothy's case meant kept shaping talk about law, child minds, and crazy folks' treatment long after he vanished. His skill at fooling experts made folks wonder if head doctors could be trusted, while his trickery showed the danger of thinking all kids are born good. The Caldwell farm sat empty after Thomas and Sarah got better. Neither could stand living, where they'd unknown kept a killer nearly 2 years. The land went back to the county, sold to builders in the 1890s, but locals steered clear for decades after. Sheriff Crawford had the cave where Timothy did his experiments sealed up right after the boy was caught, but folks who knew never forgot it. Local stories called it cursed, said animals wouldn't eat near it. Dr. Harding's journals went to the Missouri Historical Society in 1923, given by his daughter who thought her daddy's notes were too important for science to hide, awful as they were. They're still there in the Society's files, seen only by researchers with real school reasons. Thomas and Sarah Caldwell never spoke public about their time with Timothy, but both lived under fake names till they died, scared the boy might come back to finish. Sarah died in 1889, Thomas in 1894. Neither ever had kids of their own. In his last journal entry, written days before he died in 1891, Dr. Harding thought about what Timothy's case really meant. Spent 24 years trying to understand Timothy Caldwell. Fear I've reached a hard truth. Timothy wasn't some fluke. He was a peek at what folks might be like without the feelings and morals we think make us human. If he lived to be a man, then somewhere in America walks a fella who knows people's minds better than any doctor, can work folks like magic, and sees the rest of us as nothing but test subjects. This mystery shows evil can wear an innocent face, and our ideas about kids and human nature might be dead wrong. Timothy Caldwell's case makes us face hard questions about how folks learn right from wrong, and whether some people are just born without the heart or conscience we think everyone has. What do you make of this story? Think we got the whole picture, or could there be more to Timothy Caldwell's end than what the papers say? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this dark tale and want more like it, subscribe, hit that bell, and share it with someone who loves mysteries deep and dark as this. Remember, truth can be scarier than make-believe, and history keeps secrets that still shake how we see ourselves. See you next time.